Welcome to Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, thanks for watching. Well, we have an energy update with former State Senator John Pippy, but first, you're not going to believe what Kathleen Kane's sister has done. And then we've got to talk about the expansion of beer and wine and what else, but the Pennsylvania budget will do all of that after these words.
This is Pennsylvania Newsmakers, a fast-paced, unrehearsed weekly discussion with and about the leaders who shape your world. And now, here's your host, Terry Madonna.
Well, we're going to move to the state capitol, where we're going to talk about a number of things that, that have gone on in the legislature. But before that, we've got to get to this story about Kathleen Kane's sister. This is one of those where your eyes are going to go, whoa. And I'm starting with Karen Langley, Pittsburgh Post-Gazette reporter. She's often on the program. And Steve Esack from the Allentown Morning Call, both reporters who cover the state capitol. All right, Steve, this is one of those things that I just find unbelievable. But what did Kathleen Kane's sister, who works in the Attorney General's office, do that caught everybody by surprise?
Well, Kathleen Kane's sister, Ellen Granahan, is sued the agency. I don't know. Not didn't sue, but filed an EEOC complaint, Equal Opportunity Commission complaint, alleging gender and wage discrimination, that she is not paid enough compared to her male and female colleagues with the same title as Chief Deputy Attorney General.
I want to get this straight. In effect, she's suing her own sister, or filed this complaint against her own sister, who heads the Attorney General. Do I got this exactly right?
You got that exactly
Go ahead,
right.
finish.
And not only that, but Ellen Granahan, if she was hired by Tom Corbett, promoted by her sister in a very controversial decision that the State Ethics Commission said it kind of smells, but there's no violation of the Ethics Act. And then she has a long history in the agency and basically sued. And I talked to some prosecutors and for the story I wrote on that, and they said prosecutors, and it's true, across the nation and across the state, are notoriously underpaid. So if she's claiming she's underpaid. Was
it 17% that she said she was below, or something like that? And I read your story.
Yes,
something like that.
She says in her complaint that I reviewed, she lists dollar amounts for other for one of the female people who work at the same agency with the same title.
Attorney General's office.
Yeah, the Attorney General's office. And that individual makes 17% more. And then the other half of it, the higher threshold was 40%, roughly 40% more.
And in all fairness to her, there's never been any question at all about her performance and the nature of her job. I mean, there's
you're completely wrong about that.
Oh, there is? Oh,
yeah,
okay.
There's been long-standing.
Oh, gee.
I had to say it, long-standing.
We don't have enough
issues.
time in this program to get into this, do we?
No, we don't.
and her sister, of course, faces 12 counts, right? 2 felonies and 10 misdemeanors?
Yeah, perjury and all that other stuff.
All right.
And not only that, Terry, but before you go, this is another example. Kathleen Kane's office, as I said in the story, she's been sued multiple times in state or federal court for labor, employment issues, and that sort of thing. And this is just another one.
All right. Well, you'll keep us up to date. All right. Now, the legislature did something that many lawmakers have wanted for some time, having to do with tremendous expansion of wine and beer. Take it, Karen. What did they do?
Wine, mostly.
Okay.
So Pennsylvanians in a number of months are most likely going to see bottles of wine on the shelves of grocery stores. Not all grocery stores, but the ones that are allowed to sell beer currently are now going to be able to apply for permits allowing them to sell bottles of wine. This is, as well, I should say, as restaurants and hotels who have liquor licenses.
Okay.
So this is potentially
takeout.
Thousands of new outlets that can sell wine to go to customers. Right now, there are a few exceptions, but by and large, you have to go into one of the state-run wine and spirit stores to buy a bottle of wine to take home with you.
And beer?
This doesn't mess with beer, except that there has been some matter of the Liquor Control Board interpreting whether certain gas stations can have beer, and this puts into state law the interpretation that there are sometimes that they can sell that.
Now, by and large, essentially, this amounts to something that particularly Republicans, let's be candid about this, and some Democrats, but mostly Republicans, have been fighting for, because is it a step towards privatization? Is that what? I'll let you, and then you can weigh in. Go ahead, Karen.
A big subject of disagreement when Governor Wolf signed this bill this week. He and other Democrats have said that they see this as what they call modernization, improving and preserving the state business in alcohol sales, whereas Republicans, who particularly in the House have been pushing to end this state business, they say that this is a first step towards eventual privatization of the system.
All right, we're going to run to a break. When we come back, we're going to have to talk about the state budget, the progress or lack thereof. Here we go. We're in June, and the June 30 deadline is fast approaching. We'll take that up, and maybe another question or two about liquor modernization after these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, now celebrating 100 years as the statewide voice of business, and by the Pennsylvania State Education Association and Partners for Public Education, bringing the power of a great education to our schools, our students, and our communities. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Highway Information Association, the go-to source to learn about transportation projects and issues. Please visit pahighwayinfo.org. And by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business.
Well, welcome back. Karen Langley and Steve Esack join me. They are reporters. They cover all things happening in the state. All right, Steve. Last year, the Republicans in the Senate and the Democratic governor, obviously Tom Wolf, agreed to something called the framework budget, and they had an expansion, or called, the modernization of the sale of wine and beer. Is this close to that? What Karen was describing?
It's the same exact bill. Nothing has changed from what the Senate passed and Governor Wolf had agreed to, and then blew up in the House, primarily because Speaker Mike Turzai, a Republican from Allegheny County, didn't want this. He wanted full-blown privatization, selling the entire state liquor store system. He has since come around, and he has embraced this as his bill. And it's smart politics, and I think they're all pod people. It's very smart politics. Wolf embraced it. He was using, privatization. He was using those terms and modernization, and Mike Turzai is too. So it's very smart politics on everybody's point. But that issue
is now probably off the table for. I'll go to you. We got the budget coming up. Let's go to this. Number one, Wolf wants an 11% increase in the budget, about $2 billion, and multiple taxes. As we say, that ain't happening. Am I wrong about that? Does it look like that?
I think that probably most people don't expect him to get that whole thing. I mean, Republicans and the Wolf are still negotiating from very different points. We haven't been told that any major decisions have been made to close those gaps between, Wolf wanting to increase broad-based taxes to close the state structural deficit and increase education spending, and Republicans saying, whoa, we're not interested in raising taxes. And so, but potentially you get something where some revenues are raised that aren't the sales or income tax, but we have yet to see what's going to happen.
Niche taxes, maybe a niche tax or two, a couple $100 million to education. Because that, Steve, I'll turn to you now.
Right.
That seems to be.
And that's part of the liquor deal, or the beer and wine law that just went into effect, or the governor signed. Is supposed to raise between $115 million or $150 million. So that's more revenue there. and then we'll wait and see will they expand gambling in any way, shape, or form, and count that as extra revenue, and then do some niche taxes, that kind of thing, on tobacco, cigarettes, that along those lines.
Back to you on this. So it looks like there could be a modest increase in the state budget with some of these niche taxes, but here's my question. The June 30 deadline, I don't think any lawmakers, the Republicans want to get to Cleveland, the Democrats want to get to Philly for their national conventions. I can't believe that they want big stories coming out of the state with the budget not done, with school districts and counties and human services complaining, while particularly the Democrats are in Philadelphia. Do you hear any of this? Is there a sense of urgency you think that you didn't have last year?
So certainly, the main players here are saying that they do not want to go through a repeat of last year. They're pretty clear about that. And I think now, that it is weeks to go until the June 30th deadline. We're getting to the point where we're going to have to see some action here. We haven't yet on reaching that deal that's going to allow them to not have a repeat of last year. But, we're going to have to watch, and perhaps there will be something.
Yeah. Any other defining issue that you think is, Karen's smiling as soon as I said this, that is likely to hold this up?
I don't know. Yesterday, there's been a lot of kumbaya moments lately with the legislature and the governor, and no one seems to want what happened last year. And that went on, and it was ugly. But to answer your question, I think gambling is the next big issue. I mean, yesterday, there were slot machines in one lawmaker's house. They were given previews.
You mean they brought real slot machines?
They brought real slot machines,
and they weren't at the airport yet. And they weren't. Right, go ahead.
And it was just like it's everywhere. There are armies of lobbyists from the casino industry.
Oh man!
In there, and they don't want
this because of the competition and the loss of revenue, right?
The cannibalization of the slot revenues. They don't want that. And then you have all the issues of internet gambling. What are all these issues going to be put back into this big, gigantic bill, which failed horribly in the House before Memorial Day?
So would you agree if it's kept simple, it probably has a better chance than if they start including all these other issues in it?
Yes, however, Republicans, I would think would, insist on pension reform potentially. If Wolf is asking them to raise taxes, even these, smaller taxes, I think that as negotiating points, I wouldn't be surprised if some of these other issues get dragged in.
Yeah. Well, I'll get the final word on this. If I'm right about this, there's never been a sales or an income tax in modern history increase in an election year. 77, 83, 91, 03. Steve, you've written a lot about this.
Yeah.
There's not going to be a sales or...
Oh, absolutely not. I don't think anyone believes that. I mean, Governor Wolf couldn't even get one last year.
When there wasn't a big election.
Yeah, exactly. But your own polls show that voters think politicians and the folks that run Harrisburg are the state's biggest problems right now. So maybe that's why we're seeing all these coming together moments.
Yeah. All right, coming up, we're going to have an energy update with Senator John Pippy. We'll do that after we talk about bills. We're going to pay some bills.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Credit Union Association. Pennsylvania Credit Unions, where people are worth more than money. To find a credit union that is right for you, check out ibelong.org. And by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's energy information source. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Hospital and Health System Association of Pennsylvania, working towards a healthy Pennsylvania, and by the Pennsylvania Coal Alliance, representing companies involved in America's most affordable, reliable energy source. To learn more, visit betterwithcoal.com.
Well, former State Senator John Pippy joins me. He's the CEO of the Pennsylvania Coal Alliance. He represented a district in Allegheny County and parts of Washington. Look, Senator, I can't have you on this program and not ask you about the Rust Belt and let's start with the candidates, the reporters, and just about everybody else flooding in to parts of Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin. Do I got that about right?
You have it.
What is going on? Why this interest in that particular segment of the electorate?
I will tell you, the silent majority is angry, they're frustrated, and they're speaking up. And it is not a political party per se, because it's Democrats and Republicans, but you have men and women from the Mon Valley, from Greene County, who were averaging $80,000 a year jobs, and they kept on hearing politicians talk about how they want family-sustaining jobs. Well, they were sending their kids to college, and now they see and they believe that the policies of their own government are taking those jobs away, especially with what's going on globally. So they're real frustrated. And it's interesting, I had someone tell me yesterday, I couldn't believe this. They said that they're supporting Sanders. But if he doesn't get the nomination, they're going to support Trump.
Some of them will support Trump, and some of them won't vote.
Right.
Would you agree?
Right.
There's a mixture going on.
It is. I think all those little, all the different models they use for polling, whether internet or telephone polling, they better do some analysis, because there's a lot of energy out there on both sides that you've never seen before.
No, I agree.
And the question is, once you get to the conventions here in Philly and then in Cleveland, what happens after? Because it is, I've never seen anything like this in 20-something years in politics.
Yeah, well, I think the anger is palpable, and we see it in the polls that I do and others have done, not just in with that group of Rust Belt, blue-collar working-class voters. I mean, I couldn't agree more, and there's going to be a huge interest in that part of the electorate. Candidates already in those regions, reporters out there doing a lot of these interviews that you're talking about. All right, I want to ask you about coal, and let's start with the world first of all. And where do you see, in terms of the world use of coal and the expectations for the future?
Well, it's interesting because there's, I believe, a huge disconnect between the political talking points out of all the different governments. I'll just leave it at that, and the reality. The reality is, and these are all government numbers, so you can go to our website, Better with Coal, and look them up. But the International Energy Agency and the Energy Information Agency, which is the federal organization, both agree that coal usage globally will increase by almost 40% over the next 20 years. So you're going to see, and the reason why is growing countries such as developing nations, really is a term they use, such as China, India, Indonesia, Vietnam, Europe, Europe as a region, and then the continent of Africa. Their populations need energy, and the number one source of energy by far will be coal. And that contradicts with everything you're hearing here in the U.S., and that's the issue.
All right, we're going to continue with this topic. We're going to run to a break, and we'll talk about coal after these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Medical Society. Inspired physicians committed to the good health of Pennsylvanians and the advancement of the practice of medicine. And by the Pennsylvania Healthcare Association, advancing quality, improving lives. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Business Council and by the Pennsylvania Business Council Education Foundation.
Welcome back with former Senator John Pippy. We're doing a little update, particularly on coal. All right, let's. You were talking about the global impact. What does it mean for clean coal here as a way to discuss and be involved and be, in some sense, a partner with what's going on around the world?
So I've told you, I'm an environmental engineer, and there is a strong argument to be made. Here in the U.S., since 1970, we've increased our coal usage by about 160%. We've decreased the emissions by over 90%. And the reason we've done that is because we've continuously improved our technology, our scrubbers, all the different things. These developing nations are going to build 4 times the number of coal power plants that we currently have in the United States. They're building new ones. We should be focusing on helping create second and third generation new clean coal technology around the world. And that would actually be the least costly and easiest way to reduce carbon emissions, reduce any issues with pollution. Beijing, the reason that Beijing now looks like what we used to look like in the 70s.
I mean, you can't see about a block away with this
because
smog.
They have the old, they don't have the same environmental regulations. They have they're fixing it, but they have a lot of the old technology. So if you really cared about this, you would actually be pushing the United States to be a leader, just like we're a leader in pharmaceuticals. We do all the research, and then so if someone in Africa can get a very...
We could keep the price of them down a little
that's
bit,
actually,
but that's another issue.
That's a whole different discussion.
Yeah.
But what happens is we do the research, and then those drugs are provided globally at a much lower rate, and that's a healthcare political debate.
Yeah.
But
we'll save you for that.
I can cover that if you want.
We'll get the. Go ahead.
But it is. If we do that, you would actually have a better environmental performance by the plants. You would, because of the growth of energy needs, we're going to need twice as much energy in 2035 as we had in 2010. So 20,000 terabytes is going to become 40,000 terabytes, and that's it's twice as much energy. That's the reality of what's going on in the world.
All right, in the state Senate, there was a bill passed that had to do with clean power, right? That was passed overwhelmingly with more than 40 votes. That may have surprised some people, given the nature of the partisan and ideological differences. What did the bill do?
So that was Senate Bill 1195, Don White's bill. He represents senator from Indiana County. He has a Homer City power plant right in the heart of his district. What that bill did was it developed a process for Pennsylvania to comply with the federal Clean Power Plan proposal that's currently actually being debated at this, in the courts. And it was a bipartisan approach that said we will look at all the relevant facts, do the appropriate analysis, and if there is not an agreement between this administration and the legislature, then it would give them up to give them enough time to review the proposal so that you can build consensus. Because energy is huge. It's important for jobs. It's important for incomes. It's such a big player. You don't want to rush into developing a proposal.
Yeah. All right. Well, look, I want to thank you for coming on, giving this update. And back on the politics of it, I think it's going to be very fascinating, the interest in going to exist in the Rust Belt with a bunch of states that could decide the presidential election. But thanks for coming in. All right. We'll see you next week for another edition of Pennsylvania Newsmakers. And as always, stay well.